Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Semoto podcast. Today, here with us, Sean Delaney from Doers Growth. How are you, Sean?
I'm very well, thanks, Marco. Good to speak with you, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for coming. So, quite excited about today's podcast because we're touching on something important. I mean, Doer Growth is a really well-known company in the Web3 space, marketing, video production, but more importantly, you guys focus on the founders, passing and transmitting that image of the founder behind the company. So, what we're going to cover today are the do and don't for founders, how to pass their message in a better way. But please don't let me butcher it. You introduce yourself. Tell us what you guys specialize on.
Sure, no, that was very good. That's exactly it. So, yeah, basically, our goal is to help founders of Web3 businesses elevate themselves and their brands, their businesses to the next level. So it really kind of stemmed out of something that I had done for myself, as being someone in business development and sales for a long time, but I really saw that I was working with a lot of Web3 businesses in previous roles, clients of mine who had fantastic businesses, really cool projects, but they just weren't getting enough eyes on them and their products and their services. Um, and for me, that was kind of criminal. And what I had learned myself was, there's a very easy and efficient way to get a lot of eyes on your content and yourself and your values and your opinions without spending lots of money. So me and my co-founders, we kind of productized what we had kind of built for ourselves and were doing in our sort of past lives and previous companies, and kind of put a service around that. And that's kind of what we do. So social content for founders of Web3 businesses to really kind of push themselves and their companies to the next level.
Amazing. No, thanks for that. And I can vouch for the quality of what these guys are doing. Sean has been kind enough to give me a ton of tips as well. So thanks for that. We know that there is plenty of room for improvement on this podcast as well. It's a work in progress. But Sean, let me ask you, why giving visibility to the founders? I mean, we are in Web3. It's all decentralized. So why is that important in your opinion?
Great question. And I think, first and foremost, it's important for anyone in any business across the board. I'm personally passionate about the Web3 space, having worked in it for a little while now, and that's where most of my network is. But as we all know, it's kind of an area that's had a damaged perception. For the last sort of 5 years that have been a bit of a whirlwind, particularly a damaged perception when you're talking about non-Web3 people. So these are your future investors, your future clients. When we're talking about mass adoption, we need to kind of turn that perception around. And this anonymous, faceless image that certainly parts of the Web3 space have had for so long, I think is partly a culprit for this damaged perception. And if you're investing in a business, whether you're investing it to support the business, or a VC or an angel investor, or you're literally investing it from a customer, a user's point of view, we want to have that feeling of trust and putting our confidence into a business where we don't see or really know anything under the hood at the best of times is not going to be great, given Web3's sort of history of scams and whatnot. I think it's even more so. So for me, it's an absolute no-brainer. If you've got a business, a Web3 business, and you wanted to take yourself to the next level, get investment, hire top talent, generate new customers, you're going to be the first thing that people look at. If a company approaches me, outreaches to me for whatever reason, the first thing I do, I don't go to the company page. I go and see who are the founders, who are the developers building this project. What's their track record, what's their history. And if I get nowhere, it's just a name and there's no track record, I probably move on. I won't hold much faith in that business, and
I
there is no
personally, I
better
personally,
way.
I completely agree with you. I mean, decentralization, it's more than a concept. It's something absolutely beautiful that can bring the power back to the masses. But on the other end, and Semoto is all about it. You know how hard we are working with our review system, with our vetting system to bring credibility back. So what it lacks in Web3 is accountability, putting a
Mm,
face behind the company name, putting a face behind the camera instead of just an AI generated video in response to the accountability, and
mm.
it's extremely important. I completely agree with you. So, what are the differences between doing marketing and pushing a company brand to pushing the mark of the personal brand?
Cool. So I wouldn't say they're two separate things. I would say they're intertwined. And again, I think that certainly in terms of social content and social branding, the brand of the individual will always outweigh that of the business, because ultimately it's the collective weight of the individual's personal brands. You can call personal brands personalities or values for that sake. That's what creates the company's brand. You know, if you've got a toxic founding team, the brand will be kind of fairly toxic from that point of view. You know, you look at any business that you have an emotional positive connection to, that's generally because you align with the individuals within that business's values, or not, as the case may be, when we don't have a good feeling with a company. So again, we're emotional creatures as human beings. We connect with people more than logos. You know, there are few occasions, you know, when you're looking at your Nikes and stuff like that, that there is an emotional connection to a business, but that takes a lot of money and a lot of time to get to that point. When you're looking at a small business that doesn't have that starting point, the success of the company brand is driven from the individuals. Who are these people? Do I buy into them? You know, any Web3 project that we can think of that we've got a personal connotation to, it probably stems from understanding the founders, their visions, their values, and buying into them. You know, Web3 or not Web3, that's the case. And personal brand content is just the best. It's utilizing the tools that we have available to us today in this day and age. You know, social media platforms, whether it's LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, it doesn't matter. Those are tools, platforms that we can leverage to put our best foot forward. Ultimately, all we want to do is go, okay, you're a founder of a business. What are your values? What are your opinions on, you know, the latest trends upon your roadmap? Why are you in business? What's your story? And then we take the platforms that are available to us, where our customers are sitting, and utilize those to kind of, you know, stand on a rooftop and sing those things. And ultimately, what you're doing through the content is finding people who align and connect with that. So as this could go back to the point originally, you know, if you've got a brilliant business, a great idea, and a great team, if you're only really your shouting voice is only going so far, you're missing out. You're missing out on potential connections, a potential community. And again, it just goes. We use content to leverage the platforms we have available to us to get your message out there.
That's a fair point. And I was thinking about what you were describing. Building a brand, just from the company point of view, it takes ages, it takes a ton of money, and is extremely hard because you are trying to fidelize a customer just based on an idea.
Hmm.
Nike, obviously, probably one of the most successful one. McDonald's. But on the other end, the company that managed to do both at the same time, exactly what you described, those are really powerful. Let's look at Tesla with Musk. Let's look
Mm-hmm.
at Apple with Steve Jobs. It's incredible what they achieved because was the man pushing the brand. These are
Mm-hmm.
marketing genius in my opinion. Um,
Yeah.
so, what is the roadmap? What are the steps that a founder has to take? And by the way, later on, I have another question for you that is, are we just talking about the founders or who should be the voices? of the company. But let's start with what do you think are the steps to start this journey for a founder?
Great questions. So the steps would be, I mean, I guess it depends what the starting point is. So if you're a founder that's not creating content, just start creating. So the 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 first point of call is, where is your target audience? Where do they live, right? Is it predominantly LinkedIn? Is it predominantly X? Is it predominantly Instagram? Is it a mixture of those? Wherever they sit, wherever your audience is, you need to start speaking to them. And so what we have is most founders, most people I speak with, there's a couple of main issues. There's one which is a cumulative amount of self-imposed barriers. You know, they're not comfortable writing in public. They're not comfortable maybe getting on video. They don't know sort of what to talk about. And again, there are loads of tips I can give to get going on that front. And then there's the other one, which is not having time. Again, these are the two biggest kind of hurdles that people come up against. And what I would say normally to any founder is, in the early stages, just get comfortable hitting post. Think of it, you know, even if you want to break it down, a thought of the day. Twitter is great for this because it encourages short snippets, almost instantaneous brain dumps. The biggest problem that I find most people have is the self-imposed barriers. They want to create the perfect post. They want their post to be a 30-page PDF talking about, you know, everything under the sun that appeals to everybody. That's never going to happen. Even if you give it a go, you'll become overwhelmed. So the starting point for me is to say, look, like, take you know, a pen and paper and write down 4 or 5 key pillars of content that you find interesting. A couple will very closely align with your business, right? You know, if you're a DeFi protocol, you know, DeFi, and within that pillar, you'll have, you know, the latest trends, the latest news within DeFi. You might have crypto industry as a whole. You might have a pillar that you're interested in talking about regulation. And then you'll have a couple of other pillars that won't necessarily be technically focused. They're just the things that you're passionate about. Maybe it's community. Maybe it's, you know, decentralization. Whatever it is, drop these things down, and you should start being able to brainstorm some topics, some ideas. If it's, you know, a reaction, your thoughts to a trend. The way I always describe it is what you talk about with your friends over a coffee or over a beer. You know, what are those things that you're passionate about? These are the things that you should be talking about. So when I hear that someone says, I don't know how to write, for me, that's saying that there's a self-imposed barrier that tells me they're probably trying to write something that doesn't align with them. They're trying to please everyone. Because at the end of the day, you know, I know some of the things you're passionate about, Marco. If you were to be able to just, you know, off camera talk to me, you know, we could talk for a long, long time. What we've got to do is remove those self-imposed barriers that make us think creating content is any different to that. Might be just taking a little snippet, putting it out there.
I don't disagree, but I have a follow-up question on that, because don't
Mm.
you think that can cause self-harm? Meaning, generally, company content tend to be more focused on facts, what the company is developing, how is he helping people, achievement, capital raised, whatever it is. But those are facts. If a founder posts his thoughts, something is that is interesting. We're living in an era where everyone gets upset. Doesn't matter what I said. I'm going to offend somebody.
Yeah.
Don't you think that there is also the risk of posting the founder thoughts to harm a good product?
So there's a couple of things that I would say in response to that. One would be, don't do it if that's not the kind of person you are. If you're someone that is very controversial and has controversial opinions, you can sort of that will come across in your content, right? And as long as it's nothing, you know, if it's something that's really going to harm your business, then I think that's more a question of the individual and their values. You know, I always say that as long as you're an honest, integral person, having a strong personal brand or a personal brand where you really put yourself out there is only going to benefit. Now, if we dumb it down, we're not talking about extreme views or anything like that, but we're talking about a topic that takes sides. What we want to be doing is encouraging communication. We want to be starting conversations. And if we try and pick a piece that we're sitting on the fence and it's not controversial, it just won't fly. But if you are someone that sits on the fence, then that's you. That's your brand. That's okay. If you're not someone that sits on the fence, I would say don't necessarily do it. Again, what we were trying to do by pleasing everyone is we end up pleasing no one. Again, just think of anyone in the world of business or beyond business who has a strong personal brand on social media. The reality is they will probably polarize. They will have people that really like them and people that really don't. That's the nature of it. There's very few people that, across the board, I can maybe think David Attenborough or something like that.
No, exactly.
That seems to, if you try and find that, then it's, I think you will come up with content that doesn't hit.
It's also
The key
true the
thing for me
opposite,
is,
right? There are companies that there are people selling their own brand that made a career being controversial, right? So it's a risky
yeah,
move, but for somebody, it works pretty well.
yeah, absolutely. That's right.
Awesome. Going back to the other question that I asked you. So, who should represent the company? You reckon the more the merrier, or the pressure, the responsibility lies with the founder?
So, the more the merrier. Everyone should have a personal brand because ultimately, from an individual point of view, removing the connotation of a company association, your personal brand for me is your personality, right? It's putting your values, your skill sets, your expertise, your interests out in public, and this when done right, will benefit the business that you work for or your business if it is yours. If you're someone seeking employment, being able to have your front foot forward on social platforms will help you get jobs if you can show this experience. CVs will become a thing of the past, so everybody should do it, right? And within a business, what we like to a term that you might hear thrown around is founder-led content. So in the same way as if you want to create a good culture within a company, it has to start from the top. You can't have a good company culture if there's toxic culture at the top. And it's very much the same thing. If you are driving certain values within your business, and remember, these are values, they don't have to be technical expertise. It can be certain values that in your business. The only real way to do that is starting from the top. And as a founder on day one, it's probably just you. So it will have to start with you. And ultimately, hopefully by creating content, you're going to start to attract your future employers, right? And then it should be a fairly easy transition. We should hire people with different experience, different skill sets, but similar values. That's what makes a business run. And then if you're building this foundation of a business that has a very publicly facing business from top down, and you're all singing from the same hymn sheet in terms of values, and this is again why it's important. You may talk about very different things, but the values that will come across should be the same. And the stronger that is, with the number of people doing this, the stronger your business's brand is. And again, if we look at big established companies, top places that have great cultures, you can see it a mile off because the types of people that work there. What do they like? What do they talk about? What are their values? How long do they stay at that company? And again, this is all floating back to why do we do it? It's due diligence of a business. A business with a great culture is going to be a business that is a good client to have, a good partner to have, a good company to invest in, all of these things. So again, what we are all doing when we consume content on any platform is we're doing due diligence on people, whether it's people we want to connect with on a social level, whether it's businesses we want to follow, whether we realize it or not. Every post that goes out, it's us going, do we align with that? Do I like that? Oh yeah, I do. Or no, I don't. And again, this is what we're doing. We're building a community with our brands.
You're so right. I never thought in those terms, but even content, me talking about my company, it also gives me the set of skills that then drip down into the company culture, because I need to be able to present not just to the world, so not just to the outside world, but internally. I want to make
Mm.
my people know what we are all about, what are our values. So they're interconnected. You're absolutely right. Now, before starting the podcast, you said something extremely smart that resonates so well, and it allowed me to steal it from you. But
Sure.
Sean, I'm a founder. I'm not an influencer. So let's get down to the nitty gritty. And by the way, that resonates so well because starting a company is hard. Running a startup is probably the hardest thing that I've ever done, except for putting my 2 year old to sleep and keeping him down to sleep. But when you put on top of it a podcast, social media, and the variety of social media out there, it's overwhelming for sure. So,
Mm.
what do you think? So, frequency of creating the content from the founder point of view, for format. I know you guys are absolutely masters of or videos and interviews type of formats, but what else? And then channels. Obviously, we all
Mm.
know LinkedIn probably more B2B, TikTok for the younger generation. But what's your view?
So in terms of platforms, produce content where your audience lives. Don't overwhelm yourself on day one. If you're not a content creator and you don't produce any, if you go, right, I'm going to do it, YouTube videos, Instagram, LinkedIn, you'll do it for a week and you'll burn out. So stick with, one platform initially, that where most of your audience are, it exists, and start with that. In terms of post frequency, if you're someone that doesn't create content on a regular basis, start with something that's realistic. You don't have to be posting every day. You don't have to be. No, does it say that? Consistency is key. Consistency doesn't have to be purely quantity, but if you post twice a week, stick to twice a week. Algorithms will pick it up, whether you're a consistent poster, and so will your audience as well. They'll come to expect, okay, if you post on a Tuesday and a Thursday, it breeds that consistency and that familiarity that works basically long term. It's also easier to manage. It's easy to build a system for yourself. If you know, right, I post on this day and this day, that the alternate days on the week before will be, okay, at this time I'm going to batch create content. I'm going to create my content for the next few weeks. What I would say, from the great thing about personal brand content is, remember, the whole point is we are trying to get the world to see Marco's values, thoughts, and opinions. So the great thing about that is you've already got them. They are there. You don't have to change anything you're already doing. It's now going, how do we take the stuff that is there and easy for you to talk about out into the world? And as I mentioned before, this is normally self-imposed barriers that we come up with. Said, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. Start with something that's realistic. If it's, even on LinkedIn, just get into the habit of hitting post twice a week with your thoughts on, some of those pillars that you jotted down. So those opinions and thoughts that are already there, the things that you talk about over a coffee with your friend, those are the types of things that you're passionate about. If you're passionate about something, your audience is going to resonate with that passion. Then if you're looking at format, again, if you're someone that doesn't create content, you don't want to say, right, I'm going to do 2 videos a week, 2 text posts and a carousel. You're going to become overwhelmed. If you're someone that's comfortable in front of video, you mentioned younger generation, sometimes, a 20 something just as a dab hand, going into the personal brand thing because they're so comfortable creating video. I work with some CEOs, who are much older, illustrious career, incredible resume, but really struggle recording themselves on camera. So there's a different sort of set of things, barriers we need to break down there. But ultimately, you want to get comfortable in front of video. There's loads of ways that we can do this that works with different people, having a podcast, just setting up podcast style recordings. And again, it comes back to why do we do that? This is getting our best self forward. And if you imagine communicative skills become more powerful, it's like a linear thing. So at the strongest end of the scale, we've got face to face, shake your hand, look you in the eye, right? That is the best way that we can build relationships. The furthest point away from that is written text. Video is just very close along that line. So in the same way as you and I have built a relationship, we've met a couple of times in person, we've spoken a lot on calls like this. Imagine we tried to build a relationship only over email. It just wouldn't hold the same weight. We wouldn't have been able to, it would have just stayed very strict and formal. So again, this is why video is important. You mentioned some big names, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk. We've never met these people. Well, I haven't anyway. But we've probably got a pretty good idea what they would be like in person to have a coffee with or a beer. How does that happen? That comes through video content. Gary Vaynerchuk and Gary V is another one that he's just there all the time in little snippet of videos on every platform. What it means is you know exactly what he's like, you know exactly what his values are. And again, this is why we build a personal brand. When you do that to a certain extent, your investor, before you even send the email saying, hey, we're looking to connect, we're looking for some support, they know who you are. They have decided one way or other whether they will invest in you as a person and therefore your business. So again, this is where video is only going to become more and more important. It wasn't possible that long ago, but now you just need, whatever phone you've got in your pocket is enough, like to the point where it's overkill, unless you're doing a really fancy production, which you don't need for personal brand content. No one needs anything more elaborate than the phone they've got in their pocket to start creating great content. In fact, Gary V just uses phones for most of his recordings. He's got an infinite budget.
To be honest, and I mean, this is not sponsored, but I blame you. I ended up buying a better microphone for when I chat with people.
Good man.
I blame you for that. Any preference? Oh, actually, let me rephrase this one. Any platform that you particularly wouldn't recommend to use?
No, not really. There wouldn't be one that I wouldn't recommend. It solely comes down to where does your audience sit. For example, I don't use TikTok. That's not because I've got anything against TikTok. It's just because I'm sure I could find clients there, but it's all that, weighing up the value of my time. Will there become a point in the future where there comes a time where I go, maybe we should start, creating content on TikTok? Quite possibly. We will look at it at that time. My platforms, my primary platform is LinkedIn. It's where I've got the biggest network, biggest audience. It's where all of our clients have come from. And then as a secondary, X, because, it's big in the Web3 space. If you're a fintech business, perhaps X is not going to be of much value to you. But maybe if you're a B2C business, your Instagrams, your Facebook. It's also a geographical consideration. Like in Vietnam, where I'm based in Southeast Asia, Facebook is huge. Back in the UK, it's not what it was 10 years ago. So there's those sorts of considerations as well.
Sure. Do you see any major difference? I mean, I know we touched briefly about it at the beginning, but content creation and brand from a Web2 founder to a Web3 founder, do you see any major difference, or do you think that at the end of the day, they're pretty much aligned?
I think they're getting closer and closer, and I think that's just a fact of Web3 maturing. I think if you go back 3 or 4 years, everything was on X. Most of the founders of projects had, caricatures and NFTs as their image. And I think the space is moving away from that, in a combination of projects that continue to stick by that perhaps aren't getting, the investment they once were. And I think it's becoming more normal now. Like business 101 is business 101, whether you're Web2 or Web3. So there's still there's that requirement to have a mature brand from a personal point of view and a corporate. And so I think, they are coming closer together. Combine that with, Web3 projects are evolving to be more normal businesses, supply chain projects with utilizing blockchain technology, financial services. You've got a lot of big institutions coming into the space. They value traditional business setup. So again, I think will come a point where the types of content that you create, the platforms you create, will be more determined by who your end customer is, who your community is, and therefore who your potential investors are, rather than are you Web 2 or Web 3.
While you were talking, I was thinking also, in the network, we work with a lot of VCs. They use us to find top experts like yourself for supporting the company that they have invested in. Now, the way that people are raising now has changed. They need to uh, generate some revenue. They must have some traction. But what hasn't really changed and what is still on the top of the agenda of any VC is the team. Who are the founders? So what you described, I think it adds a ton of value for our audience, because being out there, it's an easier way to be recognized also by investors, and to drop those breadcrumbs that will lead to you, right? So it's definitely important. What are the common mistakes, Sean, that Web3 founders make when pushing their own brand?
So firstly would be by not creating content. Not creating content, outsourcing it in terms of the literal outsourcing of it, which a lot of people do around the world right now, is just getting ChatGPT to create content. Just create me a LinkedIn post on XYZ. You're just going to get something generic then, and it's gonna kind of fade away into nothing. And that's driven by people thinking, well, let's just, I want to create content for content's sake. Again, what are we doing? We're trying to put people's personalities forward. So that can't be the personality of ChatGPT. It can't be the personality of a ghostwriter. So again, like what we do is we built a system that allows our founders to create content, a lot of content with minimal input. But all of the stuff, the foundation of anything that we take for a piece of content, is not written by us. It's not written by AI. So it's the absolute foundation is the transcript, the words, the opinions, the thoughts of the founders, whether that's through a video recording or an audio transcript. The point is, it's the things that are being spoken about are authentic and true to that person. So that's a big mistake that people make, is either through not just giving it all to AI, or trying to appease everyone. You have this content that is not actually their thoughts, values, and opinions. It's what they think people want to hear. And it's common because when we start out, we have that thing of like, oh God, I want everybody to like this, or I don't want to, and we end up, again, it goes back to what I said before. We want to break down the barriers, so the content that you create is how you talk with your friends over a coffee. And again, like I always say, the only people that will be negatively impacted by having a very public personal brand are the ones that don't have great personal brands, which is another word for personalities, right? And these are the people we want to weed out from. It's a bit like hiring someone. This will replace CVs. CV, you're like, you can only tell so much because everybody makes themselves sound a little bit better than they are. Personal brand, if you can pop onto someone's social media and you see a year's worth of content about the things they're passionate about, things they love doing, the things they talk about, you can't fake that. You can't fake that over that amount of time. If you take something that you're passionate about, Marco, and you get somebody and you say, look, to try and convince Marco you know what you're talking about, when they don't, you'll spot it a mile off. A CV, you can't tell sometimes. But, you know, if I try and start talking passionately about cars, something I know nothing about, a car enthusiast would spot a mile off that I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Absolutely. No. That's great advice. We're coming to the end of the podcast. Any final advice for the founders listening to us?
I would say if you haven't started, just start creating content. If you create content already or it's sporadic, build a system that allows you to be consistent, and that doesn't have to be lots of frequency. It just has to be consistent. And then the
Can you
third thing
elaborate
would
a
be,
little bit
again,
on that, Sean? What do you mean with build a system to support you?
so
What would you recommend?
So what I would tend to do is, again, based on your starting point. So if you're going from scratch, nothing, say if you're going to post twice a week, going to post on a Tuesday and a Thursday. They do particularly well on LinkedIn on those days, for example, engagement's a bit better. So next week I want to post Tuesday and Thursday. So what I will do is I will stick an hour in my diary tomorrow, perhaps, to batch create content. And when I batch create content, I'm going to open a Notion database that has my decided pillars of content, for example. And maybe this is where you can use AI. Brainstorm, take those pillars of content, take those 5 pillars of content and maybe 5 sub pillars and the things that you're interested about, and just say to ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, say that, you know, give me 10 topics on each of my pillars of content, or even 10 questions that are relevant. And when we see a question in front of us, we can answer it, because in the same way as now, if I just said, hey, Marco, what's your outlook on, the crypto space for the next 3 months, given the latest, US politics that's going on, that you would have an answer. Where if this I said, hey, tell me something about crypto, we're all over the place. So again, this is the
easier
system
to start with a question in front of you. It gives you that input to start creating, right?
That's right. And then one other thing that I would say, always, again, this is particularly valuable if you're starting from scratch, is go on your preferred social platform, again, LinkedIn, for example, and just start searching through people that you enjoy their content. You have an affiliation with them, you enjoy the thing, they have similar values, and start looking at the content that they create. A lot of my inspiration for content will come from other people's content. So remember, content is just a conversation. So it doesn't mean copying it. It just starts a train of thought. In the same way as if I'm at a networking event, all I'm doing is taking, somebody might say something, I might hear a talk or a panel, and I'm like, God, that's a really interesting. Here's my take on that. That's where the inspiration is. Again, sometimes it's a bit hard if we just sit down and go, I'm going to create some content. But if we've got, here are the things I'm interested in, here are some questions, and here's 10 videos, articles, posts that I've saved over the last week of people that I'm interested in what they talk about. And that's normally a good place to start.
Amazing. Sean, I would say let's end on this note. Thanks for being on the podcast. Thanks, more importantly, for being part, for Doers Growth, for being part of the Semoto ecosystem, another top company joining our marketplace. For all the audience, at the bottom of the podcast, I'm going to post Sean and his partner link into the Semoto platform. Please get in touch because the value that they can add is simply astonishing. Sean, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Mark. Absolute pleasure.